Okay, it's time to commit. 2024 is the year for prioritizing yourself. Begin your new smile journey with Byte, and you could start seeing results in just 2 to 3 weeks. Just order your at-home impression kit today for only $14.95 at Byte.com. Byte clear liners are doctor-directed and delivered to your door. Treatment costs thousands less than braces, plus they offer financing options, accept eligible insurance, and you could pay with your HSA, FSA. Get 80% off your impression kit when you use code WONDERY at Byte.com. That's BYTE.com. Start your confidence journey today with Byte.
Hello and welcome to the On Monitor Brief. It's April 19th. I'm Kristen Tallman. Today's main segment is a conversation with All Monitor's State Department correspondent Elizabeth Hagedorn on the Palestinians' attempt to achieve full UN membership status and the U.S.'s subsequent veto. But first, let's get you caught up on the headlines. The big story hit the wires early Friday when Israel carried out retaliatory strikes against Iran, reportedly targeting locations in the west of the country. Explosions were heard in the city of Isfahan, prompting commercial flights to divert their routes. The attack comes less than a week after Tehran launched a barrage of more than 300 drones and missiles in its first ever direct assault on Israel's soil. That unprecedented onslaught was itself a reprisal for an earlier strike in Syria widely blamed on Israel. Economies in the Middle East and North Africa face a shadow of uncertainty from ongoing tensions in the region, according to senior IMF officials in Washington. And the daughter of Democratic Congresswoman Ilhan Omar said on Thursday she had been suspended from Columbia University over her participation in an encampment in solidarity with Gaza. Now, on to the main story. Hi, Elizabeth. Welcome to the On Monitor Brief.
Hi, Kristen. Thanks for having me.
So yesterday at the UN, the Palestinians' attempt to join with full membership was vetoed by the U.S. at the UN Security Council. How did we get here?
Well, Kristen, as you mentioned, more than 6 months into the Israel-Hamas war, the Palestinians had sought to revive their bid for full membership at the United Nations. They last attempted to do so under very different circumstances in 2011. UN watchers will recall that Palestinian President Abbas came before the UN General Assembly. He held up the Palestinian application letter for membership and made an impassioned plea for statehood. There was a lot of excitement at that time. Thousands of people gathered to watch that speech from outdoor screens in the West Bank, and applause reverberated around the General Assembly. That enthusiasm was short-lived. To be admitted as a new member, Palestine would have needed the approval of at least 9 Security Council members and no vetoes, followed by a 2/3 majority in the General Assembly. And it was clear back in 2011 that they lacked even 9 votes. So the Palestinians dropped their bid and spared the United States from having to use its veto. Instead, they went to the General Assembly, which voted to upgrade the Palestinian status to a non-member observer state. That's the same status held by the Vatican. It means Palestine can't vote in the General Assembly, but it can participate in various UN bodies, such as the International Criminal Court. As we'll, I'm sure, discuss, they got a lot more support this time around from the Security Council. And even though they knew the U.S. would ultimately block Palestinian membership, I think the Palestinians felt there was some value symbolically in putting their application to a vote anyway.
Yeah, I mean, on Thursday, when I was watching the vote take place, what was really striking is when the UNSC president said, okay, all in favor. And, you just saw all these hands shot up, and then abstentions, there was 2. And then for veto, obviously just the US. I mean, it strikes me that it seems like the US looked a little bit isolated, in the UN with the veto. And then, just essentially on the world stage, are they increasingly isolated on this issue?
As you mentioned, of the Security Council's 15 members, 12 voted in favor of the resolution. The United Kingdom and Switzerland abstained, and the U.S. vetoed as expected. The U.S. originally wanted Abbas to shelve the Palestinian bid, as he did in 2011. That didn't work, nor did trying to persuade other countries to vote against this. You saw a real show of support on the Security Council, including from U.S. allies France, Japan, and South Korea, which all all voted in favor. I do think yesterday's vote, to answer your question, does serve to further isolate the United States over its diplomatic support for Israel. This is the fourth time the U.S. has used its veto to shield Israel at the Council since October 7th. And yeah, we have yet another image for the history books of the U.S. representative being the lone person on the council to raise his hand with a veto. Palestinian President Abbas, in a statement, called the U.S. veto unfair, unethical, and unjustified, whereas Israel's foreign minister praised the Biden administration for blocking what he called a shameful proposal.
Okay, what happens next?
One of the arguments against granting the Palestinians membership was that it would endanger negotiations on a two-state solution. In explaining the American vote, the U.S. Deputy Ambassador Robert Wood said the veto doesn't reflect U.S. opposition to statehood, but is an acknowledgement that statehood should come from negotiations between the parties. That's been the longstanding U.S. position. But of course, the last attempted peace negotiations were in 2014. The Biden administration wants to reinvigorate that process, but faces long odds. As part of that, it's hammering out a mega deal that would see Saudi Arabia normalize relations with Israel in exchange for Israel supposedly taking irreversible steps toward statehood. Before October 7th, the U.S. was working on a similar agreement, but negotiators face the same hurdle now as they did before October 7th, and that is a right-wing government in Israel whose members are largely opposed to a Palestinian state.
Elizabeth, thanks so much for joining the Al Monitor Brief.
Happy to be here. Thanks, Kristen.
That's it for today, April 19th. You can read more details on all these stories and others impacting the region at allmonitor.com.